Hello and welcome to episode 9 of SEO on Demand. Today we're going to talk about the hidden beauty of alt image text. But before we get into that, let's provide some background on ourselves.
My name is Daniel Bagley. I'm a copy editor and content creator here at Page One Power. I've been working for the company for about 7 years, and I've done pretty much everything for Page One. I started off as a link builder and moved into content creation, and then went into being a copy editor, and I still do a little content creation on the side.
I'm Amethyst Tagney. I've been working at Page One Power for about 5 years now. I started off as a content link builder, writing articles. I've been doing more things behind the scenes as a link specialist for the past few years. And so we have a lot of cool things to talk about today. As we said before, we're going to delve into the hidden beauty of alt image text. We'll discuss what exactly alt descriptions are, why they're a lot more important than they may seem, and how to optimize them. And make sure to stick around to the end of the show, since we'll share some great alt image text examples so you can get a good idea of how to write your own.
Writing good alt text is an art. If you can nail effective descriptions of images, you can put the cherry on top, so to speak, of a web page and signal to search engines that your page is completely optimized and ready for absolutely anybody to get a high quality user experience out of it. But before we get into the art of alt text, let's get a good working definition of what it is.
Yeah, so what is alt image text? Technically speaking, alt text, otherwise known as alt descriptions or alt attributes, is just text within HTML code that describes what an image is on your page. In fact, alt text will actually take the place of the image in a couple different scenarios, including if someone uses a screen reader to access the internet, or if an individual has slower internet that won't load the images.
Google and other search engines use alt text in image search to better understand the subject matter of images. Alt text is as old as the Web Accessibility Initiative, which began in 1996. Now, the Web Accessibility Initiative was a response to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which made a lot of mandates in terms of accessibility, and on the web, it kind of hadn't gotten there yet. So the Web Accessibility Initiative was bringing things up to date, and alt text is a big part of that. You can easily input alt text in your content management system by accessing the image options and typing a description for the image into the alt text field. And let's really dive deep into why alt image text is important.
Yeah, so we already touched on this already, but alt image text is extremely important for a variety of reasons. First off, alt text improves the accessibility of web pages. Descriptive alt text provides richer context to your page for individuals with visual impairments who use screen readers. We liken it to an audio broadcast of a sports game. If you can't go to the game or watch it on TV, a verbal description allows you to know what's going on. And it's also like a wheelchair ramp or any other accessibility elements of a business. Not only is it crucial for your business, but it's also mandated by law. Accessibility is mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And sites that are inaccessible could be in violation of ADA Title III. It has been known that sites have been sued by users for poor accessibility. Some big lawsuits of note are lawsuits against Beyonce and Nike sites, and both were cited for a lack of alt text. And another big one is the National Federation of the Blind sued Target for not having alt text, and the lack of this alt text made it impossible for blind individuals to browse Target's online catalog. Alt image text is also important for individuals living in an area where internet access is less than optimal. Internet speed should not exclude people from accessing the whole of your content, which makes alt image text so pertinent?
Alt text is part of the person first approach to SEO. Google and users want sites to create content with the best interest of the users in mind. User experience is actually now a huge ranking factor for web pages. Specific and descriptive alt text can improve user experience for those who are not able to view images. Google has specified that alt text is only a ranking factor for image search, but up to 40% of Google search engine results pages contain images. Actually, it's a little bit over 40% today, looking at the Mozcast, which basically tells you what the Google search engine results pages are doing. So quality alt text may help your page rank better in a SERP that contains images. And since that's right now about 40% of SERPs, SERP being a search engine results page, alt text is extremely important for ranking in nearly 50% of pages right now. Most importantly, if an individual with visual impairment or slow internet has a positive experience on your site because they can understand the images, they're more likely to stay on your site. They'll come back and review your brand positively. So with that said, let's talk about how to optimize alt image text and really get into the meat of what you can do to make sure your alt image text is tip top.
Our first tip is to be specific. Be as specific as you can be. Let's say you have an image of a cat that's crossing the road. That doesn't really give a whole ton of information. Like, what color is the cat? What time of day is it? Is the cat in the city or is it out in the country? Really hit on the who, what, when, and where of your image. Because specificity improves UX, helping the reader see the image through your words.
Yeah, the example that we created is if there's an image of a cat crossing the road, you might want to say cat crossing road in your alt text. But the more specific one would be a calico cat is crossing a well-lit street in twilight. So yes, being as specific as possible is really important. And with that, you want to tie in your description to the content on the page. So when you're describing an image, think about the subject matter of the page. When Google is looking at an alt text in non-image searches, Google views it like any other text on the page. In other words, alt image text is very much like any other paragraph or sentence in a blog post. You wouldn't want to include any sentences or paragraphs that are off subject. In the same light, you will want to make sure that the alt text is on subject with what you're writing about. So for example, in a blog post about nurses experiencing burnout, which is quite a common thing, a person isn't just leaning against a wall with a frustrated look on their face. A nurse who is burned out after work is leaning against the wall with a frustrated look on their face.
And when it makes sense to do so, use your target keyword in your alt text, but only if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, if it comes out, reading weird, don't do it. And along those lines, definitely avoid keyword stuffing at all costs. At best, Google simply won't index the image under any of your keywords that you're trying to aim for. And at worst, you'll get dinged by Google. When you read an article, it's less than optimal when you're reading it and it's just keyword stuff. It's not an enjoyable reading experience and it won't be an enjoyable experience for those reading your alt text. And if you have a series of images on your page, you don't have to use your keyword at every single page. In fact, it's probably better just to use it on one or two. The less, the better. And try to use your keyword on an image that really encompasses what your article is about.
Right. So you're saying that if I have one main image, which is typically the one at the top of the page, that I can use my primary keyword in that image. Is that what you're saying, Amethyst?
Yes, definitely I would feel like the primary image, the very first image, try to pick an image that really speaks to what the article is about and use your keyword in that image alt text.
And it just makes sense because that primary image, we typically tend to choose an image that is capturing what our article is about. Therefore, including your primary keyword there in the alt text for that image doesn't seem awkward at all. Some sources say to keep alt text to 125 or fewer characters. While there isn't necessarily a character limit, it's best to keep it concise. And this is where the art of alt text comes in. You should be as descriptive as you can, but don't overdo it. You don't want to bombard the user with words. Think about all the words necessary to capture what's happening in the image. If someone were to read it to you over the phone, would you be able to get a clear understanding of what's in the image? That's a good litmus test for whether your alt image text really is doing its job.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Also, don't say an image of or picture of in the text. Screen readers already identify it as such through HTML. So it's a bit redundant to include those words in the alt text. It's also a best practice at P1P to use gender neutral language. Unless we know for certain the pronouns the subject of the image prefers, we lean on the side of being more inclusive.
Unless the article directly refers to a specific gender. So an article about women in the world of engineering would have an image of a woman engineer. In that case, you could identify the person in the image as a woman. It just ties in directly to the subject matter of the article. So when we were getting into looking at this subject for this podcast, a website called Alt Text as Poetry. It's done by Shannon and Bojana, who identify themselves as disabled artists and activists. They run the Disability Visibility Project, which is an online community dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying disability media and culture. And this website really kind of brings it into focus just how important something like alt image text is to individuals who are disabled and who do rely on something like a screen reader to access web content. Shannon and Bojana point out that alt text is often written in a reluctant, perfunctory style, but it has tremendous expressive potential. I think that's something as an SEO specialist, we tend to be utilitarian about something like alt text, where alt text as poetry is saying we don't have to be. And they're saying we need to attend to language, the choice of words, the tone, the word connotations, and practice word economy. And poetry has a lot to teach us about paring down language to create something that is expressive yet concise. Shannon and Bojana from Alt Text as Poetry even advocate for having an experimental spirit with image alt text. That's going to be something that's a little bit tougher for a lot of us who are trying to capture what's happening in an image. But if your blog post or article is a little bit more on the experimental or creative side, you can feel free to get experimental, playful, exploratory with the alt text. And Shannon and Bojana are advocating for experimentation that moves towards better and more nuanced accessibility for alt text users. And thinking about it from the viewpoint of somebody who is using a screen reader, if all you're coming across are pretty plain language alt texts day in, day out as you're surfing the web, it's going to be a delight to come across one that is a little bit more creative. So with that, let's move into some examples of great alt text before we wrap up.
Yeah, so our first example, we have an article titled Holistic Medicine for Senior Dogs. And a very simple description of the image we use would just be black dog. However, that's very unspecific and doesn't provide a lot of context. A much better description would be A close-up of a senior black Labrador retriever with graying hair and sad brown eyes. This description gives you a much better mental image of what the dog looks like. Having the word senior dog in the alt text also ties back into what the article is about. And using words describing the emotion of the subject too is a nice touch.
Yeah, for an article titled Utilizing Mobile Technology for Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder, see if you can imagine this image as I read off the alt text. A child with autism wearing glasses as well as a light blue shirt and a skirt sits atop a wooden desk in front of a window holding a smartphone. Now that's an example of an alt text that uses one of the keywords that is in the title for the article, which is autism. And it's also very descriptive of the visual elements of what the child is doing so that you can really get a good image of what's going on. The final example that we have is for an article titled HIPAA Compliance in the Age of Remote Work and Healthcare. And for that image, we have an alt text that reads, a doctor in a white coat and stethoscope holding a digital tablet in the foreground, while a pair of nurses wearing scrubs in the background review notes on a clipboard. So as you can see, it's really setting the scene there and giving a lot of visual cues for what's going on. It's kind of like you could imagine if you were writing a novel or even a short story and you were practicing using descriptive language. That's what we're talking about when it comes to writing a really high quality alt image text. And that's all we have for you today.
Yeah,
Amethyst, I'll let you go ahead and take it out.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening in. And we're so happy that you were able to join us. Hopefully you were able to get some good tips and can improve your alt image text in the future. And we really hope you join us for the next episode.